All right. I think that's my cue. How's everybody feeling today? I hope I'm extra loud uh, in your computer, in your face. I just want to say welcome home, everybody. We are so glad that you are here. I want to invite you all the participants I see, to liven up the chat. Who are you? What's your name? And then we have a question for you. How do you feel when you are trusted? How do you feel? How does your body feel? I feel free and happy. Tally told me earlier that she feels like she's in the flow of it, that folks are engaged, they feel respected. So, how do you all feel when you are trusted? That's our first question. And let's have fun. Welcome. My name is Masha. I'm with the Latino Community Foundation today. I'll be the moderator. I'm going to set the tone for this conversation by telling some stories and a little bit about who I am and where I come from. I came to the Latino Community Foundation via Southside Chicago as a community organizer, and prior to that, in the Peace Corps, where I learned about the dangers of top down charity, top down international development or philanthropy, and all the unintended consequences. Through all of those experiences, I really learned never to do anything from a place of pity or guilt, but instead from a place of love, from a place of deep, deep respect and trust of the people. As a 22-year-old immigrant kid from Russia with a business degree and some Spanish skills, I landed in rural Guatemala, and I knew from day one, because my parents mostly told me, like, you're not going to be able to change the reality for Guatemala, the big issues of corruption, of income inequality, of poverty. You can't change organized crime. You're 22 years old. You don't know shit, my mom told me. But she also reminded me that you could listen and you could love. You can open up your heart. You can connect with kids. You can connect with community. Um, and you can support the existing leaders. That's what I learned, and that's what I brought to my organizing experience in Southside Chicago. We have leaders all across our communities. They know what their communities need, and it is our duty and our like gift to be able to stand beside them and to push them and to support them and to listen to them. Those tools, love and listening, I think are more important than money. And I know you all are here talking about money, but we are here to remind you that it is actually love and trust that changes the world, not money. When I arrived at the Latino Community Foundation, we were actually doing a lot of fundraising. The F in our name is the F word, I call it. You know, we don't have an endowment yet, we're building it. And my first job was to raise money, you know. So I remember connecting to a program officer on the phone. It was my first experience. She was super nice. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna get this grant. Everything is gonna be awesome. I felt good on the phone. And then she sent me the application, and it was just outrageous. You know, it took me days to fill out. Um, and then she finally gave us the grant and the award letter. I remember receiving the grant agreement. It was pages long, and it had all this formal language. And I felt like I was going to go to jail. It was like, here are the things you can't do. You can't do this. You can't do this. You know, I'm not good at following rules anyway. So I was like, oh my God, I really have to pay attention. Um, it definitely did feel like they trusted us. And at the end, they were like, we need quarterly reports. And if we don't get your quarterly reports, then we're going to take the money back or not give you the next money. And I was like, okay, we're going to follow the rules. Everything's going to be cool. And I'm going to show them what we can deliver, right? As we always do. And we did. And I sent them reports, and I never got replies. It felt like nobody read the reports. And I was like, you have this process, but who is this for? Literally. Like, where does this report go, right? Um, when we launched the Latino Giving Circle, the first one was Sadi, who is the founder, the founding executive director of Philanthropy Together. Sadi's an entrepreneur and all about love, and we wanted to do things differently. We wanted people to feel feel seen, to really feel heard, right? We didn't have a lot of money to give out, and we knew that those things would be the original gift, right? What we would learn years later, it was actually that was the actual special sauce. That was the magic that helped leaders feel differently. We always reminded our donors that it is their love and respect that folks crave more than the money. There was a lot of, pushback sometimes from certain Giving Circle members to say, no, 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 we need to know what they're doing with the money, with the process, et cetera. We would push back. When the grantees would come to pitch, we would say, let's clap for the leaders before they start speaking. Let's honor them. Our grantees used to cry at the grants night, not because of the award, but because of how they felt. They felt validated for the first time. They felt respected before they entered the door, right? We would hug them, pour them wine, give them food, etc. So I am here to introduce these incredible women and to remind all of you tuning in today to not look to big philanthropy for inspiration, right? I want to remind you that many of them have failed our communities, like for real. But that's not what the conversation is about today. I'm here to remind you to look within, right, to your heart. I'm here to remind you to look at your parents, at your grandparents, at the elders in our community, the most generous people you've ever met in your life. How do they give, right? That's been the focus of the Latino Community Foundation for all of our grant making. We have 20 giving circles, 500 members. We've invested close to $2 million in grassroots leaders. And what those leaders tell us, money is nice, but it's that love that really changes the world. So I'm going to turn it over to these incredible women who have a lot of advice and a lot of practical tools. That's what today is all about. Let's learn and grow together. This shit is not easy. It sounds really easy, but you're going to hit roadblocks and it's going to be real. So we're here to tell you the truth. So because I love people sincerely and genuinely, I want to get to know them first. So my first question to you ladies, as you introduce yourselves and your giving circle, what do you love about yourself and what do you love about your giving circle? So Kris, I'm gonna start with you.
Thank you, Masha. Well, I guess about myself, I try to always be kind and try to have kindness be my default. In our current world where so much feels out of our control at the moment, we do have control over how we treat one another. And so I hope that kindness is my guiding light. And what I love about our collective is that we are a continuous learning organization.
Love it. Thank you, Kris. Fatima, what about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be in community with you all. For me, what I love most about myself is my commitment to justice and liberation. So that is, I think, what centers me and helps me make decisions, is making sure that it's rooted in justice and in liberation.
That's right. What about your circle?
Oh, sorry. So I'm a member of Collective 365. I'm a co-founder, and Collective 365 is a regional twist on a giving circle. So we provide capacity building and grant funding to individuals, groups, businesses, and nonprofits in DC, Maryland, and Virginia who are working with and or for Black and Brown communities.
Awesome. Veronica, what about you? What do you love about yourself and your circles?
I think what I love about myself is that I am compassionate. I lead with compassion, and that gives me courage. So I'm not afraid of much. And so that's kind of all I can say about myself. But about my circle, I'm here today partnering with Impact 100. And so I love their courageous step in this trust-based philanthropy space. But Sisterfund, I'm a founding member of one of RVA's first Black female giving circles called Sisterfund. And what I love about that circle is the courage of those women who stepped out in a space that was just kind of not occupied several years ago. So I love the courage of those women and what they've accomplished.
I love that. Thank you. Talley, what about you?
I think what I love most about myself is I'm excitable, full of ideas, full of ideas and undeterred, just undeterred, very, very brave, I think, in terms of just willing to kind of push ahead. And what I love about Impact 100 Richmond is just willing to be in the sandbox, willing to learn, willing to change, willing to be flexible, willing to acknowledge that we don't know. And I think that's really, there's a lot of wisdom in that.
I love that. I love that. Okay, now we're going to get straight to the juice of it all. And I'm going to actually go backwards. So Talley, you're going to kick us off. So how are you embedding trust-based philanthropy, or just trust, trust-based tends to sound even more jargony to me too, so what are you learning? What do you want people to know?
Well, you all are going to have a treat. There's a lot of amazing people to hear from. And so we're going to go really fast, but just know, I think all of us would say that we're available to you after this. So if you're, if you have questions for any one of us, certainly put it in the chat, but also know that you can reach us. I mean, I'm going to talk really fast and try to give you a few things, but there's so much more I can say. And I really am in a learning space when it comes to trust-based philanthropy. So there's always new ideas that are coming, but in a nutshell, Impact 100 has been around in the Richmond area we're going on our 13th year. So we have, over that time, probably had a total of 1,000 members that have come in and out of our circle. We're about 200 or so now. We just gave our big grants last night. And the way we have done it is we have continued to give large scale grants. That was really a big need in our community, and one that we wanted to answer to here in the Richmond area. But about 5 years ago, when we did our strategic plan, we went out and talked to the community members and talk to our members, and there was a real desire to deepen our relationships within the community. It's great to give grants. It's certainly really important. Nonprofits know a lot about what they need to do, and getting the money to them was core to what we were trying to do. But there was something missing. There's like always a middle person in between us and being in relationship with the community. And so that's probably my first piece of advice, is just to go back and look at how you're doing things and think about how could you get closer and build real relationship with folks. And I think that's really what has been the driving force behind what we're doing. In a nutshell, what it looks like is we have a 4-year multi-year grant, $25,000 each year. So $100,000, because we give $100,000 grants. That was kind of the magic in that.
Nice.
And we do $25,000 in partnership with a committee based in the community, of which Veronica Fleming, who you're going to hear from in just a minute, is a part of. She comes from she's got a lot of experience she can share with you guys, but she is also a part of this committee and lives in the neighborhood. And that's really the biggest, I guess, trust-based piece of this is we literally don't make the decision. We bring the resources, we bring the volunteer support. So we're kind of like the task rabbits, if you will, of the process. Application wise, I mean, it's just one page. In fact, in some cases, we've written it. I mean, it's really the barriers to getting that paper piece done is meant to be non-existent. The idea is really to engage with the community and have them, telling the community what they'd like to see come forward so that they can review it and make decisions about it. So I think that the biggest thing is, how do you get your members to come along on that journey for you if you've been a long time, doing it one way? And for us, it really was a strategic planning process. It was engaging very one-on-one. I had coffee and wine with anybody who would talk to me over a 2-year period about why we needed to make this change. And then as far as actually getting into the community, I think that the biggest learning is be really humble. Be really humble. I am a lean forward kind of gal. You can tell by my energy. I want to make forward moving progress. And what I really learned, Veronica can talk more about this, but in communities where you're trying to get closer, you are walking amongst ghosts. And in particular in Richmond, Virginia, there's a lot of unseen things happening around that you have to hold space for. And I think Masha said it well, listening and love, just sit and listen. There's so much leadership that already exists that you don't need to fill. There's no void to be filled by your leadership. It's just really, can you bring the resources, and are you willing to just sort of sit back a little more? So that's been really hard for me because I am a forward-leaning kind of person. But I'm learning, and I'm willing to admit that, you know, and even say it out loud to the group I'm working with, like, this is hard for me, but I'm going to shut up and let, you know, let's let you tell me what it should happen. So
I love that, Talley. Thank you so much. That's really real and candid advice. You know, sometimes how hard it is to really shut up and give others that space, you know. I'm actually reading a book by Chef Jose Andres. I don't know if you guys, I can't see that, but he's the man who's feeding the world. And there's a quote in the beginning where he said, too often charity is about the redemption of the giver, not the liberation of the receiver, right? And Talley, you said something very important. You said, you know, you have to do the organizing behind the scenes with the donors too, right? So pour the wine, pour the coffee, and have
bring the childcare, you know, bring the childcare, bring the coloring books. But I'll tell you, and I mean this sincerely, and Veronica, you can pick up this. Here's the thing. I wish I could say to all of you that we had some grand plan and we executed against some plan. We did not. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. What we knew in our hearts was that leadership existed within the Fulton community, which is who we're partnering with. And Veronica, you will see, is a prime example of that. And if we showed up and if they were willing to accept our, you know, friendship, then something beautiful could happen. And I think that is what happened. But even up to the minute of the first meeting where the decisions were going to be made, I was planning to go and sit in the room with everybody and, you know, talk about what the decision was going to be. And then I looked at one of my counterparts, you know, who was there with me, Carol Ann, and I said, we can't go sit in this room. They've got it covered. They don't need to tell us what the decision is or even why the decision is the way it is. We need to be in the other room talking to their kids, or, you know, talking to the one individual, you know, children, and serving food. That's what our job is. And I'm so grateful that I had other women there with me who looked at me and were like, you're totally right. And that was not something that we dreamed up ahead of. It was just something in the moment when you get to really know people and you recognize their inherent power and experience, it will just be a gut feeling. You will trust that feeling inside that says, I don't need to be in this room.
That's right. I love that. Thank you, Talley. Veronica, what about you? What do you want to add to all of that and your other experience with Sisterfund? What have you learned?
Yeah. Well, I think in this particular instance in the neighborhood I lived in, to its credit, Impact 100 did respond to a call by a deeply embedded neighborhood-based nonprofit. So we are giving generally to nonprofits who serve the people we really want to impact. And so they did respond to a call to this nonprofit organization to really utilize the wisdom and leadership of this existing group of community leaders to launch its first trust-based effort. And when I say that this community has existing, really experienced leadership, it's been around since before the 60s, really leading and growing this community. And because I'm a resident of this community, the community leaders came to me and asked me to be a part of this decision-making process, which was very humbling for me. I wear a few hats in this process. My son was born in this community, so I know the community, but I left and then worked in the community for about 7 years, helping the community to develop a plan, which they did, called Greater Fulton's Future. So there aren't many communities that have plans. So when you come into Greater Fulton, there's a plan created by the community that folks are expected to honor and follow. And so Impact 100 identified, with the help of the neighborhood nonprofit and the existing leadership, a group of women who came around the table suspiciously, but Impact 100 allowed itself to be taught by community residents about the history. There's a deep racial divide in this particular community. It has the history of having been literally destroyed back in the 70s. And so there's a deep divide that we want folks to honor and know the history. And so I would say I would commend Impact 100 for coming into the community and then shutting up and sitting back and saying, yeah, these folks know what they're doing. We're going to follow that lead. And so the folks in the community really do lead this process, and Impact 100 is open to that kind of innovation. I would say, interestingly, as a founding member of Sisterfund, our approach on the one hand was fairly traditional in some respects, but because we were African-American women who were, most of whom, it was founded by 6 women, 5 of us were and are leaders of nonprofits. And so we were aware of 2 key things. One was the challenge that Black-led nonprofits face in dealing with funders, major issue. And then secondly, the challenge of capacity. And so we made a decision early on to make meaningful gifts, of course, based on the size of our capacity to give, to make meaningful gifts to nonprofits, but to come to know them in that process and to provide mentoring and capacity support. So we haven't gone down the road of making trust-based gifts at this point, but we began in a trust-based space. And so we're growing in that direction. We'll get there. So we're not quite there yet.
Thank you, Veronica. Fatima, what about you? What lessons have you learned? What specific things are you guys doing differently?
Yeah, so we're a baby organization in comparison to the other panelists. We had a soft launch on Juneteenth, 2020. So we aren't even a year old. And I got pregnant with the idea in 2016. And it actually came from working at a nonprofit who was a recipient of Impact 100 and just being really inspired by a group of people putting their money in to do good in the community. But I realized like, oh, $1,000 wasn't in my budget, you know, to be a member. And so I started talking to other people and figuring out, okay, so what does a giving circle look like for me and people that share my identities? And so that's how Collective 365 was born. So for us, somebody wrote in the chat, no void to be filled. And for us, it was making sure that everyone knew that they had a place, and that there was a void if they weren't there. So we have 2, sorry, I'm outside, you're gonna hear trucks. We have 2 types of membership: general membership, which is $0 to $49. So as in like you could literally not give anything and you still be a member annually. And then we have voting membership, which is $50 or more annually. And voting membership just means you get to vote on how the money is used. But then we invite folks that are not persons of color to what we do is called pass the vote. So if I am a white person and I gave $200, technically that is 4 votes. So you could say, I want to vote, but I also want to give 3 votes to a general member who's a person of color who couldn't vote. And so that's another way that so trust for us is about the giving and those that are getting. So like the giving and receiving. And another thing similar to Talley, like making sure that the application was very simple. So you have 3 ways to apply: phone, video, or written application. So phone is just that. So you call, set up an appointment, and we read you the questions and type your answers for you. Video, submit a 30-minute video. It can be less than that, but no more than 30 minutes. And then written is just that, a standard like Google form. But it's all narrative based. And I believe there's only 3 questions that are narrative. Everything else is like a checkbox. Because again, we wanted it to be easy, remove the barriers. We see ourselves as like a window or door of opportunity, because we know that if we give somebody money, more money will follow. And so that is one of our criteria, is to see like, does this applicant have access to traditional funding? That's not to say we wouldn't give it, but we try to give it to people who are new or maybe are smaller and been around for a long time, but just aren't getting, you know, the big impact $100,000 grants, right?
That's right.
So that's another thing that makes us unique. The biggest thing that makes us unique as far as trust, which a lot of people are still like, what? We give money to people. So you don't have to be a 501c3. You don't have to be meaning a nonprofit. You don't have to be an LLC, meaning a business. So this year we had over 200 applications. Unfortunately, we only had a small percentage, like less than 10% were individuals. And I think it's just because we're new and people are still like, are you sure you're really going to give us money? But we're hoping that next year more individuals will apply. But those that applied were just like, oh my gosh, I love that this is an option. And it inspired me to move forward with what I'm doing in the community because there is this opportunity. And so that was just like mind blowing that some of these people were writing us thank you notes even before we made a decision. They were just like, thank you for like seeing us and
That's right.
realizing that like our efforts matter, even if we're not a 501c3, even if we're not an established business. So for us, that's the trust building. And we all throughout our website and our marketing are always saying a person that can describe a problem can describe a solution. They just need time, space, and resources. So to Tally's point, like, what are we doing to be the resources? So we have capacity building. So all of our applications at the bottom, it's like 15 things they can check off. And then I'll be connecting them actually this month to members of the collective to partner with them for either pro bono services or at, you know, a discounted rate to like help them with like grant writing if they need, you know, assistance getting transportation, things like that. So even if we can't give you a grant, we still give you capacity building support.
Nice.
And then those that get the grant, they also get capacity building. So it's not an either or situation. And yeah, it's just been a whirlwind. Literally, when I say we are building the plane while we are flying it, like legit, like I've never done really any like social media marketing. So if you go to our Facebook, which is like the @ is up here, our Facebook or our IG, that's all me. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Some of this stuff might look crazy, but we're just trying to get the message out. And I think what resonates with community members is that anybody can start their philanthropy journey, right? So like, even if you only have $25,
That's right.
that matters, right? And so you don't have to wait till you're dead or you know, hit lotto to make a difference. And so a lot of people are just liking the accessibility of like, hey, I can give monthly, annually, I can give a small amount, or I can give a big amount. Ironically, our average donation is $100, even though you only need to give nothing, right? So that in itself is a testament. But our first year we raised $17,500 and we were able to divide that up amongst 7 organizations.
Nice.
And this year our goal is $35K to raise. So we're excited. We also do a free educational things. We have a YouTube channel. So my quote on our website is like, individual wealth is nice, but I'm trying to build community wealth. So that goes through with education. So we have different topics that impact Black and Brown communities. Well, all of the issues impact everybody, but we use a lens of like focusing on Black and Brown communities. And we are very intentional of having speakers that are also, you know, of Asian descent, African American, Black, Latinx, Hispanic. So making sure people feel seen, right? That matters too. So I think that covers everything. I was trying to like do word vomit here.
Well, I know you're going to raise a ton more money because what you're doing is so special and really rooted in trust and accessibility. I love the video, you know, applying via video, via phone. You know, a lot of our groups, they don't have the time and the resources and the capacity to fill out and be extremely articulate and focused and strategic in all of their applications. It's exhausting. It's a full-time job. It really is. People are professionals in that, right? For a lot of our grassroots groups, they need additional support, right? So
Yeah,
a phone
people
call,
really liked the option
yeah,
to call in. I even talked to some executive directors who were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, it was nice to just have a 30-minute
that's right.
conversation and be able to kind of get it all out
That's
and
right.
then be done with it.
That's right. That's right. I love that. That is true trust-based philanthropy. Kris, what about you? What are you learning? What's your advice?
Thank you so much. So I'm with Washington Women's Foundation. We are a giving collective in Washington State for all who identify as women. We're Seattle-based and part of the larger Philanos organization, along with Talley and Impact 100s across the nation. So currently in Washington Women's Foundation, we have 360 plus members who give annually $2,500, and we are known for our $100,000 grants, as Talley mentioned as well. We give 5 of those a year, plus smaller grant programs. And in our 25-year history, we started out always, since day one, it's been large unrestricted gifts based on trust. And we were essentially 25 years ago doing trust-based philanthropy. We didn't realize it was called that, but we were doing that. And over the years, as traditional philanthropy started adding more process and asking more questions, more data, more outcomes, and all of that, more applications, we followed that trend too. And so now we're realizing and understanding that the solutions have always been there in the community. As you all said, there's no void to be filled. These are community leaders that have been leading for decades in their own communities. They know, they're closest to the issues. They know what the solutions are. They just need access to resources to continue their great work, not more, applications, questions, data, like you mentioned, Masha, with the contracts and things like that. So, I mean, who are the reports for anyway?
For the board.
So, 5 years ago, we also started leaning into our strategic plan, focused on racial equity. We changed our grant criteria to fund organizations who center race and gender identity. And it has us right now going very, very deeply into community, which has quite frankly been a learning curve for some of our members. But we have to remind ourselves it might be new and novel to us, but it's not new and novel. It's not risky because it's been happening all along, right? For decades. And now we're the ones that are learning. So it's, in short, a process of learning and unlearning, right? Learning more about community, learning that different approaches and solutions are effective, and also unlearning some of the practices of traditional philanthropy that we've also been a part of, right? So our job as funders, as you've all mentioned, is to listen, learn, and let community lead, let community, talk about what's important to them and how they define success. And trust, works both ways. We want to, as a funder, always be aware of the power dynamic and compensate community for their time and expertise when they've helped us so much with our iterations on our grant criteria, our strategic plan, and what do they think, and do our work first, not burden them, and receive their feedback with humility and vulnerability. I mean, even if it's hard to hear sometimes, because without doing so, like, nothing will change, right? And so, we talk about counteracting systems and institutions, and philanthropy is yet another system, right? And none of us alone created it, but I have to ask myself, on an individual and organization level, what am I doing to perpetuate that? So, change is not easy, and putting these values into practice is not easy, but our values say to embrace discomfort and counteract systems and shift power and all of that. And how do we can say those words, and how do we show up as funders? How do we put that into practice every day? And so we have to, I think if 2020 and even much before that has taught us anything, community has endured such difficulty. And what we can do is show up as good partners and let community decide, and just define what that partnership looks like and how we can be helpful.
That's amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Kris. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I've seen it in practice. I remember there's so many grantees at the foundation that Sometimes we don't have a final report or an application, and then they start to send you things that you haven't requested. They're like, Masha, I was in the newspaper, check this out, you know? So if you're looking for impact and outcomes, like trust people, then they, you know, they become trustworthy. And then all of a sudden there's a real relationship there that you can nurture and grow with. Yeah. I do want folks to jump into the chat and add some questions. I have a few follow-up questions. One is a real question, right? Not all of us come from this place that we are at right now today, right? Not everyone served in the Peace Corps or was an organizer or has experience of 25 years launching and learning and giving circles, right? So when you have members come to your circle that bring that compliance culture where they're like, well, I don't know where my money is. How do we trust these people? You know, and then they kind of, they take up a lot of space. What have you learned in dealing with those folks and pulling them in and or asking them to leave? Like, what has been your experience? What do you do with those donors that are not aligned with your vision and your practice? Anybody want to jump in?
I can say, because we had to go through a big significant shift. I mean, you know, if you really want to get down to it, the way that we kind of stepped into this trust-based place was obviously, like I said, through the strategic planning process, where we really grounded what we wanted to do with community voices. And we really tried to tell the story internally about that. We did take at the heart of collective giving is about trusting women. So, you know, we definitely wanted to engage our members on this process. In other words, we send out information about neighborhoods. We talk to folks about, you know, we're doing this based on positive, here are the amazing assets of these communities and why we think they would be amazing to partner with. I mean, we didn't talk about, here's all the terrible things about, you know, these different communities, because we all have terrible things about our communities, you know? So I think we really tried to educate folks a little bit, but then if you really want to know, like my best advice, protect it a little bit. You know, if you want to do something like what we're doing, I mean, put it in a little spot and let a committee or a group of really passionate people nurture it until you can show what it becomes. I mean, I have heard for the last 3 years, we don't know what's happening with the Catalyst grant. What are you doing with the Catalyst grant? And I'm like, just wait, okay? Just trust me. Wait, and you will see. I've definitely had the calls. I definitely have heard the pushback. I've definitely had to deal with a lot of hot under the collar people who just weren't sure what all this was about. And then last night, you know, we had an event where we were able to share what has been going on, and my phone was blowing up with, oh, I see, I get it. So I think nurturing it a little off to the side can be, obviously, you know, trust at the basis should be, I mean, that should just be a bottom line thing. And if somebody can't get on board for that, I'm not down with being around them. But I think if you're trying to build a whole new grants process or a whole new way of doing something, sometimes you do have to kind of take it a little off to the side and let some folks nurture it along, because, you know, people who don't know. And so you need to give them a chance to see it, but it certainly shouldn't stop you. I don't know if that's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
I wanted to say, just from the perspective of Sisterfund, when we started Sisterfund, we were one of 2 Black giving circles back in 2015 and 2013. And I want to say to those who are thinking of launching giving circles in this space, we had to build credibility as a giving circle. We were a public-facing giving circle attached to a community foundation. We had to build credibility among the community and among organizations and women whom we wanted to join, we wanted to join. So we know what we're doing. And over the last 5-6 years, we have proven that we can do the stuff, we can do the work. And so I think now we're in a space now, only now, and because of the trust issue, only now are we in a space where we can then take some risks, really put some opportunities out there that are different, that are new, and that are risky. And I really love what Collective 365 is doing around really intentional education, because I do think this requires education. This is how and why you can trust the community to do what's in its best interest, because in fact you can, but you have to learn that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing of just putting that messaging out there. So like
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time and still do talking about Black and brown people are the thought leaders and decision makers of their community, not Collective 365. And to Sarah's question in the chat, how have you brought community voice into your circles if they don't represent the communities they want to serve? My question back is why not? Like, why aren't you having members that are in those communities? And so for us, it was very, and that's what framed our thought process around like making sure we had general membership and voting membership, because we wanted the people in the communities to not have a reason not to be at the table. So we took that barrier away. And, you know, some people might be like, well, then you're not going to always get, you know, $75,000 grant every year. That's okay. It's more important that the people, to Masha's point, are centered in justice, love, liberation. The money, that's going to come and go, but those values, like that commitment to those values, that has to be at our core, because again, for us, we are trying to dismantle white supremacy. We are trying to liberate and center justice. And so to answer your question is being intentional about in creating spaces that welcome the community in as the decision maker and thought leader, and not just calling on them to be speakers, right? Of saying like, you should be at the seat, even if that means they're not paying anything. But for us, philanthropy is about time, talent, treasure, testimony. We really want to emphasize the testimony and recognizing that you're an expert because of your experience. And so for that, you have value, and that's why you need to be a part of the collective. And so I think that resonates with folks. I hope I answered your question, Sarah.
Yes, you did. Thank you for helping me with that. Yes. And, you know, in philanthropy, traditional philanthropy, they always talk about like evidence-based practices. It's your experience. That's your evidence, your life experience. Kris, there's a specific question here for you. It says, can you please share a little bit more about your discovery days at the foundation, where you brought community expertise to members to unlearn narratives and foundational knowledge of issues?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, we've been on this journey for 5+ years now, and it is an organizational shift. If you're coming from a traditional philanthropy kind of standpoint, it is an entire organizational shift, and we were deep into our educational program, including Discovery Days now called Intersect, which is, you know, this year was a week-long virtual event of bringing community leaders, as Fatima mentioned, who are the thought leaders and leaders of their communities, to talk about, you know, what's happening. And we wouldn't even think about changing our grant criteria without doing a full organization-wide education journey first, you know, and we are very vocal about it, as other people, very visible about what we're doing, and so that people know that when they're joining us, they're joining as the journey as well. And that part of the beauty of collective giving and giving circles is that, and we can, you know, learn alongside one another, be vulnerable alongside one another, and kind of help each other, support each other along with community. And, you know, it's taken centuries to put some of these systems in place. So, I mean, 5 years is just getting started, right? So we're like I said, we're a continuous learning organization, and we're never going to be done. And for me, that is a very exciting and joyful place, because you know, we have the pleasure of doing this. We get to do it. It's joyful work.
I love that. Thank you. There's another great question here about moving folks from just being check writers to actually rolling up their sleeves and going beyond the dollar. How do you all inspire that from some of your members who are just writing checks, but you want them to go beyond?
Well, we really want to make sure that, and that's part of our shift as well, is really talking to our our grantees and our partners about what does a good partnership look like, and what is helpful, and letting them take the lead on that, because maybe sometimes what's needed is philanthropic dollars, and then we'll let you know if anything else is needed. But otherwise, we need space to do our work, and we need to create that safe space so they can tell us that and listen again.
That's right. Anybody else? Awesome. So we have 5 minutes left. I want to be really practical about like one piece of advice. We heard a lot of great like knowledge and nuggets, right? Humility, like bringing people to the table. It's not just about money. People are trustworthy. There are no voids, right? The joyfulness, the unlearning, like not shaming people, but pulling people in and be like, I'm going to meet you where you are, and we're going to grow together. The donor education component. What else for the folks that are joining, that are brand new, starting a giving circle, they're excited, and or that have been around for 20 years that are like, our circle has lost its way, we lost our values. What advice do you have, Talley?
Yeah, I'm going to be emotional. I know we only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to do this in 30 seconds. This is, I have been at this, for my adult life, which, I still have a long way to go, I suppose, to get the wisdom that I need to have. But this is some of the most meaningful work that I have been involved with. We can only heal if we listen to people. And I really genuinely just encourage you to just step into it. Start wherever you can, start the conversation wherever you are, and just build on it. There are so many ways that you can come at this. You've got so many resources around you. All of us on here are committed to this type of work, and there's hundreds and hundreds more of us. So I think there are people you can lean into, and I would really encourage you. You will be changed, and you will hopefully make the change you want to see.
Beautiful. Veronica, what about you?
Geez, I would say, so folks who are participants in giving circles, we are wonderful, generous folk. And then I want to say, get over yourself and remember why you got into this work in the first place. It is not about you. It is about the folks we serve. Remember that and get it together. That's what I want to say.
Amen to that. Kris, what about you?
I don't know that I have anything more to add. I mean, like you said, listen and learning, and just receiving feedback with humility and vulnerability, and trying to show up in a different way. I mean, I think that I've done a lot of work, and just the other day I was told what you're saying and what you're doing is not very helpful to us at this time. So you just have to hear that and show up differently next time.
That's real. Thank you for saying that. Fatima, what about you? You want to close us off with advice from the front lines?
For those who are thinking about starting, gather your people and do it. Those who are in it already and trying to shift, like I know some people are like, how do you give to an individual? It can be done, and you just have to require that they fill out certain forms to you. But if your work is centered in liberation and justice, you will find that the solutions will follow. It won't be as hard as you think. Because again, like I said, a person that can describe a problem can describe a solution. They just need time, space, and resources. So to conclude, centering that really helps cut out the other noise, I have found. And people are really ripe to do the work given the pandemic, the health pandemic, and then the epidemic known as racism, right?
Right.
To dismantle white supremacy. So I think there are people, just find them and do the work and get in good trouble.
That's right. Good trouble. I think all of you here and all the leaders of our giving circles are part of the movement, and you are all changing the future of philanthropy. There are a lot of people at major institutions that are coming to us to say, how did you do this? How can we shift our practices? There is a reckoning happening in philanthropy saying we have failed, we can do better. So, and I think they're looking to all of you for lessons learned. So kudos to you. To those of you who want to start this, go for it. Don't focus on the process. It will lead you into a dark hole. Focus on the people. That's it. And then you will win the changes you want to see. So amen to all of the sisters here who've shared so much knowledge and humility and grace and love. Thank you for what you do. We're so excited. Sadi, I hope you're proud of us and everything at Philanthropy Together and the We Give Summit. We're so happy to be part of this movement and part of the solution. All the love to all of you. I think Sadi wants you all to fill out a survey, feedback here on the session. She'll share the link right now. And I think folks are staying on for a few more seconds. So thank you, ladies. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.